I have good news to share on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. There is a new marine protected area in the U.S. off the coast of California that is the first of its kind. It's called the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. It was designated on Monday, announced on Monday, and it's the first such preserve in California to be managed in cooperation with indigenous people. The 4,500 square mile sanctuary off the coast of California's rugged central coast would prohibit oil drilling and offer other protections to an area that encompasses numerous cultural resources, including the suspected remains of ancient submerged villages. We're going to talk about that on today's episode. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And today we're going to be talking about government action that has been taken to put in a national marine sanctuary called the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. As I mentioned in the pre-intro, just before we did this episode, it is the first of its kind where it's in partnership to manage with a indigenous people, which is great. This is awesome. Now, the sanctuary is going to stretch from just south of St. Luis Obispo in California to just about the Channel Islands, so Santa Barbara. This is a territory that has been in the making since 2015, when the Obama administration allowed groups of people to submit their own area for protection. So the Chumash people decided to do this. This was very important to them. And so it was the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Indians, which submitted the proposal, and that was tabled once the Trump administration got into power for that era. And then in 2021, I believe, after years of sitting on the shelf due to that Trump administration, the Biden administration made the proposal a top priority. But after NOAA publicly posted the initial detailed plan in 2023, progress hit a wall. So many indigenous and environmental leaders wanted the sanctuary to extend up to the Monterey Bay Sanctuary, past the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. However, that wasn't going to happen for a number of reasons, including the fact that there's offshore wind companies had long planned developing near the power plant, which provides an easy connection to the electrical grid, since Diablo Canyon already has sent 6% of the state's power from coastal inland. So, they wanted to propose it all the way up to the Monterey Bay Sanctuary, which would have been a huge stretch. However, that got kiboshed because there was other ocean users. This happens a lot of times with marine protected areas. It's almost like a business plan for the ocean along the coastline. And in this case, there are different ocean users that wanted protections, and there were other ocean users that wanted to use it for offshore wind. Offshore wind has, I guess, a controversial history in terms of the way it's built and how quickly it's been built. Some people really don't like it. A lot of misinformation around windmills, around these offshore wind areas. But there's always worry about it disrupting marine mammal migration patterns, sea turtles, sharks, and so forth. So there is a lot of environmental planning that goes into that process, but it can be controversial just because of the two sides. Like I said, there's a lot of misinformation on one side saying that, offshore wind doesn't really help. However, there's a big push to put them out there, and there is shown to be proof that the offshore wind is great to have. However, when you're looking at protecting a swath of land or swath of ocean, you have ocean users that can conflict in that. And so you can't take the entire way. However, that doesn't mean in the future we can build on what's been put in place and hopefully extend to north to the Monterey Bay area, which would be really great to have, because that would make it a very large MPA with a lot of different management areas, hopefully. And we've seen different management areas before. It's not as easy to put in because that takes a lot of negotiation, a lot of discussion with the different ocean users. We've seen it happen in Australia with the Great Barrier Reef, where the Great Barrier Reef has a number of different management areas along along the reef, basically along the coastline of Australia, on the eastern coastline of Australia. And we've seen that work in a big benefit. At one point, I remember when I was a master's student in 2003, 2004, there was a presentation given where the Great Barrier Reef actually increased its no-take areas by 30% at the time, because it was at 3%, so they increased it by 30% to make 33%. And they realized that the reason why they were able to do that is they tracked where fishers were fishing in and around those no-take areas. They noticed that they weren't going in the areas where they wanted to extend the no-take zone. So they said, okay, we're going to be able to do it. You guys don't fish there anyway. We can increase it. They said, okay, since we're not fishing there, no big deal, and it's going to help us in the long run. So they added that on. So it just eventually helped. But it helped because they did studies within the marine protected area and the network of marine protected areas, the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. So they were able to get that data and show that there's not really that much of a conflict. The problem lies in a marine protected area when there's a lot of conflict, or there's conflicting sides that want the same piece of the area. So that can play a role when we look at how do we increase or how do we move closer to a larger marine protected area. Now, of course, there are some areas where some people, part of the Chumash area, but a different region, said that they did not feel that they were approached to find out what they thought of the marine protected area. Now, initially, the Northern Chumash tribe of San Luis Obispo County and region, whose tribal territory overlaps with the sanctuary now, said that this is Haley Bautista, said that her tribe wasn't made aware of the proposal until after an initial plan was already submitted to NOAA. So now again, I don't know exactly what happened here, but one of the tribes did submit the proposal. They may not have included this tribe here, or they may have just submitted just hoping that it would get designated later on and help everybody, and they brought in people. I don't know exactly what happened, but obviously it makes a big difference to have a number of different ocean users, right? Whether you're trying to have the same protections, to the table. Bring everybody to the table before you start, and hopefully they'll be able to voice their concerns. So they said they voiced their concerns multiple times and submitted letters, and the reciprocation hasn't been great. So there's still a lot of communication, even though this MPA, this marine protected area, this marine sanctuary, if you will, was designated. There's still a lot to build on. A lot of the times when we put in a marine protected area, the initial marine protected area may not be the best outcome for everybody. Some people may not be happy that they weren't involved enough. Some people may not be happy that they didn't get their voice heard, or they wanted certain things they didn't get. Certain areas that were they wanted protected or not protected, and they didn't get those. So this has to build when you're looking at a marine protected area. There's a lot of conflict that goes on, a lot of negotiations, and so this is a lot of conflict resolution when you really look at it. But the thing is like with all of these groups, the ocean to them is sacred, and it's important for them to have a place to be able to protect. So they aren't too quick to be dismissed, and that's a big thing for a lot of these groups, ocean users, indigenous people, fishers. Nobody wants to be dismissed. Everybody wants to be able to have their say, and especially when it comes to indigenous people, with the way they've been treated in the past, a lot of trust needs to be built, not only now but in the future, and that's just starting, and it's pretty rocky in a lot of places. It doesn't matter what government you're talking about, Canadian government, the U.S. government. There's a lot of negotiations that are continuing to happen for territories, but also just the basic trust of government to indigenous people relationships and vice versa is just not there at all. And I don't know, that's going to be a long time before that gets there. But these processes of building marine protected areas and co-manage these marine protected areas could help build that trust as they move forward. So that's always great. Now, just to give a little bit of a background of the marine sanctuary, it's lined with sandy beaches, rocky shores, is home of a multitude of seabirds and sea lions, kelp forest, one of the most biodiverse ecosystems in the world, and great at absorbing carbon, sit off the coast and have problems just with climate change and everything. On the deep seafloor, rough volcanic terrain harbors corals, sponges, and fish. The open ocean is home to whales, turtles, and jellyfish, of course, also sharks, tuna, fish, like large fish, salmon, all those important fish that are along those coastlines really end up being a big part of this marine protected area, of course, and they'll definitely benefit from being in this marine protected area, whether they're there all the time or at some parts of those times. Now, the big thing here, the protection, is some of the seawater along California's central coast is becoming increasingly unlivable. The Santa Maria and Santa Ynez rivers, neither of which meet state water quality standards, discharge a mix of toxic chemicals, fertilizers, grease, and dangerous bacteria. Not only do they have that from land, the rivers, but they have cruise ships and other vessels that go by that can potentially discharge very concentrated sewage, gray water, bilge water, ballast water, hazardous waste, and solid waste. And this is according to an environmental report by the Office of Marine Sanctuaries and NOAA. One of the quotes is from that report is, sewage from vessels is generally more concentrated than sewage from land-based resources as it is diluted with less water when flushed. Large cruise ships can carry thousands of passengers and can generate several million gallons of waste per day. So that's a big thing. Then you have 7 offshore drilling rigs stand in the vicinity with 3 permanently shuttered and 4 temporarily out of operation. They are each connected to shore by miles of oil carrying pipelines, and spills have fouled the sea multiple times in this area developed in the 1970s. In 1997, a Freeport McMoran pipeline ruptured, releasing thousands of gallons of oil, killing hundreds of seabirds. In 2015, an Mobil pipeline spilt more than 100,000 gallons of crude oil in the ocean. I remember seeing that on TV and online, and it was awful to see. Now, of course, with climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, and so forth, you have this innate ability with a marine protected area to protect from a lot of the human disturbances that are around, not necessarily climate change, but a lot of the other human disturbances. So, overfishing, you can stop overfishing. You can stop people from being in the area at certain times of the year or even all the time. You can stop oil production. You can stop a lot of things within the marine protected area. The one thing you can't protect, though, is water quality. These boundaries that are around this marine protected area will not be physical boundaries, obviously. It's going to be open boundaries. They're going to be invisible. There's boundaries on a map that we will be able to delineate, but there's no real boundaries in the area that we're going to see in real life. So bad water quality from rivers can actually get into the marine protected area and still affect the sea life and the habitats that are, that make this such a unique habitat. So we have to control those types of water quality, that type of water quality that's coming in. Now, one good thing is if you have a marine protected area through the Marine Sanctuary Program, there are different legislative tools that you can use to ensure that the water quality is better, because you want to make sure everything in that marine protected area is going to be better. So now there's a mandate to protect that area. It's not just any kind of just any kind of area that's found around, right? It's not just some random area that's found. It's an actual protected area. There's a need to protect it, so there's going to be a lot more focus on that. Now, Cal Poly and UC Santa Barbara will help study the ecosystem. They're going to check on it and make sure that its vital signs are good and it's getting to know it better, just like they did in the Great Barrier Reef, just like they do in other marine protected areas around the world. There's going to be a lot more research around it. There's going to be a lot more focus on the health, making sure that they can build on the health now or improve the health that it is now in the future, and so that we can build and build and build, and we can see that we're going to, the one good thing about marine protected areas, if you want more fish, you can get more fish from it. If you want more biodiversity by protecting the area and a lot of the different habitats that provide biodiversity like kelp forests, then you'll be able to do that as well, as long as you're able to enforce the actions that are happening in and around the area. Make sure that there are no fishing vessels within the marine protected area if they're not allowed. Make sure that the water quality that goes into the marine protected area is solid, is good, it's great quality water. So there's a lot of things that need to happen from now. This is just the beginning. The designation is just really the beginning of the process. Now you have to go through the enforcement and the management to make sure that we clean up these rivers. We clean up a lot of the stuff that comes off these platforms. We ensure that there are no other platforms for oil that start up again. So there's a lot of things that happen, and there's a lot of forces against it that could be overridden in the future. You know, if you have a different government in power, like an election that's coming up that is more pro-drilling, like the Trump administration that wants to drill more to bring down the price of oil, then you have a problem here. This marine protected area is going to be affected by more oil spills. It's in the business plan of oil companies and fossil fuel companies that oil will be spilled, and that is something that has to be avoided in the future. So there's a lot of things that have to happen around here. This is just the beginning of the process, and the co-management between NOAA, the National Atmospheric and Administration, Ocean Administration, NOAA, the National Ocean Administration, National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and the National Marine Sanctuaries Group will be working with the indigenous peoples are in and around that area to build on the marine protected area, make sure it's enforced and manage it properly. And that's going to be something to be seen. I think it's going to be an interesting process to see and build. And I'm looking forward to seeing this put in place, enforced, and built upon. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But that's it for today's episode. I want to bring you that good news. I know I mentioned a lot of stuff that could happen that may not be such good news. But this is a learning process. This is an adaptive management process where management changes and priorities change as we go along. We figure out what's happening with the area and what are the major threats, what are the major priorities that we have to shift in order to protect the area at all costs. And of course, we need more areas. This is part of the 3030 plan by California. This is part of the 3030 plan by the federal government. And so we're seeing this being built, part of the biodiversity plans, everything. There's a lot of things that can be ticked off the boxes in terms of environmental protection, as well as helping with, being better at climate change, being better at and being more resilient for climate change. So that's it for today's episode. I'd love to hear what you think. Put in the comments, either if you're watching this on Spotify or on YouTube, you can just put in the comments below. If you're watching this or listening to this on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app, please let me know how you feel by Instagram or DMing me on Instagram. Shows my age. Instagramming me. No, DM me on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. If you're on TikTok, you can do the same thing. You can just send me a DM. That's at Speak Up for Blue. All the links are in the show notes or in the description below. Looking forward to hearing from you. Always love to start this conversation, hearing for you to continue that conversation. And of course, if you want to sign up for our newsletter, you can do so. speakupforblue.com/newsletter. That's speakupforblue.com/newsletter. A lot of things that you can do. Looking forward to seeing and hearing from you. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.